Good morning everyone. Basa na tayo ng ating libro, History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. Today is 08 December 2022. History of the Filipino People, Part 3 na tayo. Reform and Revolution. Topic number 8. Ang bilis, no? Halos mga lahati na tayo sa libro. Topic number 8. The Campaign for Reforms. Basa. The unjust execution of the three Filipino priests Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora was a turning point in Philippine history, for it ushered in a new era. The reform movement, realizing the danger of fighting for their cause on the home front, the sons of the wealthy and the well-to-do Filipino families migrated to Europe to breathe the free atmosphere of the old world. There they initiated a sustained campaign for reforms in the administration of the Philippines and the homeland. Meanwhile, the Filipino intellectuals secretly collaborated with those in Spain and founded nationalistic societies. For more than a decade, the Filipino propagandists waged their war of propaganda against the Spanish authorities and priors, but they failed to awaken the government of the peninsula to the demoralizing realities of colonial administration. The reform movement was a failure in that it did not achieve its goals. In another sense, however, it was a success, for its failure led to the founding of the revolutionary Katipunan with separatist aims. The role of the middle class. The economic development of the Philippines in the 19th century led to the rise of the Filipino middle class. Non-existent in previous centuries, the middle class, composed of Spanish and Chinese mestizos, rose to a position of power in the Filipino community and eventually became leaders in finance and education. With a change in status, they hungered for official or bureaucratic power to make their position in the social pyramid more secure and influential, but the Spanish authorities looked down upon them, for they did not belong to the inner circle of peninsulares, Spaniards born in Spain, whose prerogative it was to rule and govern. The attitude was not surprising, for Spanish society in the Philippines was a sort of caste consisting of two well-defined classes, the peninsulares or Spaniards born in Spain and the insulares or Spaniards born in the Philippines. Pag peninsulares, guys, are Spaniards born in Spain, and the insulares are Spaniards born in the Philippines. The contempt with which the former dealt with the latter arose from a feeling that anybody born in the Philippines was ipso facto inferior. Thus, to show their contempt for the insulares, the peninsulares called the former Filipinos. The natives, on the other hand, were invariably called Indios. Ulitin, guys, ha. The natives, on the other hand, were invariably called Indios. It was not until Governor General Basilio Agustin called for the loyalty and aid of the Indios in 1898 that the latter were called Filipinos. So, ang una pala nating pangalan is Indios. Before 1898, then the Filipinos were called Indios and the insulares Filipinos. Thwarted in their attempts to win a place in the sun Thwarted in their attempts to win a place in the sun, the members of the middle class started almost unobtrusively the movement for reforms. There was no alternative. The Spanish authorities looked down upon them with condescension, if not indeed with contempt, while the natives looked upon them with suspicion, the natives having been and continued to be the victims of the mestizos' arrogant and insolent mannerisms. Between the two evils, the contempt of the Spaniards and the suspicion of the natives, the middle class chose the lesser evil, that is the natives. It was thus that the Filipino middle class and the natives came to work hand in hand, with the former naturally leading the latter by the hand. The chance of the middle class to show their political color came with General Carlos Maria de la Torre became governor in 1869. Identified with the revolutionary forces in Spain, de la Torre showed his democratic tendencies when he dismissed the palace halberdiers, lived simply within his means, walked the streets in mufti, and abolished flogging as a punishment. The Filipino middle class saw an ally in him, and on the night of July 12, 1869, they marched to the governor's residence and there serenaded him. The list of the serenaders was a roster of the well-known mestizos and insulares of the period: Jose Burgos Maximo Paterno, Angel Garchitorena, Joaquin Pardo de Tavera, Andres Nieto, Manuel Ginato, and others. Orations were delivered, a poem was declaimed, and toasts to liberty were drunk. It was a night of splendor for the middle class, but it was also a night that the Spanish reactionary group never forgot. From then on, the middle class led the reform movement, which was temporarily silenced during the decade from 1872 to 1882, when the Filipino intelligentsia, a segment of the middle class, took over the leadership from the wealthy segment. The nature of the reform movement. The dissatisfaction of the Filipino men of wealth and intellect was centered around the abuses of the Spanish authorities, civil as well as clerical. Men with a social conscience, and at least some of them with ulterior motives, the middle class, denounced Spanish abuses and asked Spain to make the Philippines a province of Spain. Wow, province lang pala tayo ng Spain. There was no clamor for independence, for the reformists believed that the Filipinos would be better off if they were to become Spanish citizens, enjoying all the rights and privileges of the latter. As Spanish citizens, the Filipinos would be represented in the Spanish Cortes, and thereby their representatives in that body could propose and participate in the approval of laws beneficial to the country. As Spanish citizens, they would then be immune from the abuses of the Spaniards and be freed from paying unreasonable taxes. Such a program constituted what has been known as assimilation. The assimilation of the Philippines to Spain, that is to say, the transformation of the Philippines to a province of Spain and making the Filipinos fellow Spaniards, was to be accomplished in a peaceful manner. The rich and the intellectuals then were reformers, not revolutionists, for they believed the power of words and not of the sword to achieve their purpose. Approximately half of their number belonged to the propertied class, and the other half to the intellectual class. It was but natural for the propertied class to shun a show of force, for an armed conflict was almost sure to affect their material possessions, to which anybody would cling desperately. The intellectual class, on the other hand, also shunned revolution, for logic and history were on their side. No uprising could have or would have succeeded without the necessary arms with which to fight the enemy. In these circumstances, therefore, the two segments comprising the middle class had to resort to peaceful means to convince the authorities in Spain to reduce beneficent reforms in the administration of the Philippines. hence the program of assimilation. The Great Reformist. Not all the sons of wealthy Filipinos who went to Spain in the second half of the 19th century were in the propaganda movement. Some of them were there to study in the hope that they would someday become successful professionals and businessmen in their own country. Only a few of them were connected with the movement. They were serious-minded young men whose faith in their country was boundless, whose idealism in a corrupt age made them think of the welfare of their country first and their personal welfare last. To this group of young Filipinos belong Graciano, Lopez, Jaena, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Jose Rizal, Antonio Lona, Mariano Ponce, Jose M. Panganiban, Eduardo Delete, and a few others whose role in the reform movement was more or less passive. Graciano Lopez Jaena was born in Haro, Iloilo on December 17, 1856, the son of Placido Lopez and Maria Jacobo Jaena. He studied at the seminary of Jaro operated by the Paulists, but it seemed that his study of religion and the atmosphere of the seminary did not in the least affect his inborn qualities as a rebel. Even as a boy, he was already thinking independently of his teacher. Endowed with the power of keen observation, he saw the sad state of his country. Lively and highly intelligent, he took to writing early in life, producing a tale entitled Praebutod. This work, which deals with the ignorance, abuses, and immorality of a certain friar named Butod, circulated in manuscript form. Its existence, however, could not be hidden for long, and Lopez Jaena found himself the object of a manhunt. Why so? Because he delineated the average of friar of the period. Butod is the Hiligaynon word for a big-bellied man. Yes, butod guys is the, the belly. Malaki yung belly. Fat-butod is the Hiligaynon word for a big-bellied man. The equivalent of the Tagalog slang butchuk. Ignorant, abusive, and immoral, the friars saw in his wife butod their own picture, and nothing excites an anger of man more than to be ridiculed in public. There was only one way out of the tight fix Lopez Jaena was in, to leave the Philippines. In 1880, he secretly left for Spain and enrolled in medicine at the University of Valencia. He later transferred to Madrid, where he found the atmosphere congenial, for he loved light and shadows, the clubs and the cafes, and the journalists of the capital. In social and political clubs, he distinguished himself as a great orator. His speeches and orations were, however, almost always about the condition of the Philippines or a defense of the Filipinos against the malignant charges of Spanish hawks. One of his greatest oratorical triumphs occurred in Madrid in 1882 during the celebration of the International Congress of Commercial Geography. On that occasion, a friar, Father Ramon Martinez Vigil, who had been to the Philippines and had written an article on the ancient Tagalog script, was praising the friars of their benevolent role in the Philippines, when all of a sudden Lopez Jaena stood up and delivered a defense of the Filipinos. At the same time, he denounced vigorously the role of the friars in introducing the maintaining obscurantism in the Philippines and in obstructing the progress of the people. Somewhat like Lord Byron, Lopez Jaena woke up the next morning to find himself famous. Triumph followed upon triumph. The following year, 1883, at the Teatro de Madrid, on the 391st anniversary of the discovery of America, Lopez Jaena, in the presence of the diplomatic corps, Lopez Jaena, in the presence of the diplomatic corps, diplomatic corps prominence. Nalito na sila. Nalito na. Alitin ko guys Okay, the following year, 1883, at the Teatro de Madrid on the 391st anniversary of the discovery of America, Lopez Jaena, in the presence of the diplomatic corps, prominent men in politics, arts, and letters, and distinguished ladies, delivered an impassioned speech in what he called America, the brains of the commercial world, and the Philippines, the heart in which all the arteries, all the veins of the industrial and commercial world converge. At the same time, he pointed out that the Filipinos did not want a semi-feudal state, neither did they want the priors who represented oppression, intolerance, and fanatism. But yes, the Filipinos wanted a free press and the right to be represented in the Cortes so that their aspirations could be considered by them and recognized by the government of Spain. There was wild applause after his speech, and the Venezuelan minister to Spain, Dr. Calcaño, sprang to his feet and embraced Lopez Jaena in the name of Latin America. In 1889, sensing the necessity of a newspaper to promote the interests of the Philippines and the Filipinos, the Filipino Reformist founded the newspaper La Solidaridad. The first number of this periodical came out on February 15 with Pablo Villansarez as financier and Lopez Jaena as editor. The aims of La Solidaridad, as expressed in its initial editorial, follow. Our aspirations are modest, very modest. Our program, aside from being simple, is clear: to combat reaction, to stop all retrogressive steps, to extol and adopt liberal ideas, to defend progress, in a word, to be a propagandist, above all, of democratic ideas, in order to make this supreme in all nations, here and across the seas. The aims, therefore, of La Solidaridad are described as to collect together libertarian ideas which are manifested daily in the field of politics, science, art, literature, commerce, agriculture, and industry. We shall also discuss all problems relating to the general interest of the nation and seek solutions to those problems in a high-level and democratic manner. With regard to the Philippines, since she needs the most help not being represented in the Cortes, we shall pay particular attention to the defense of her democratic rights, the accomplishment of which is our patriotic duty. That nation of 8 million souls should not... 8 million lang pala nung araw. That nation of 8 million souls must not be the exclusive preserve of bureaucracy and traditionalism. The Soli, as the newspaper was lovingly referred to by the Reformists, became the mouthpiece of the Filipinos in Spain. It published not only news but also essays and articles about the Philippines and the Filipinos. In 1891, at Barcelona, Lopez Jaena collected these speeches and articles and published them in book form under the title Discoursos y Artículos Varios. Yung dyan ko umangal na naman. It is the credit of Lopez Jaena that he initiated the reform movement which gathered strength as the years rolled on. Tapusin ko lang yung kay Lopez Jaena, ha? Tapos kay Marcelo del Pilar bukas na. Okay. Discoursos y Artículos Varios. It is to the credit of Lopez Jaena that he initiated the reform movement which gathered strength as the years rolled on. So great was he as an orator that even Spaniards admired him command of their own language. He was fiery, and no one would suspect that such a man of small stature and slovenly habits could sway the masses of men to his side by the power of the spoken word. He was slovenly and careless, as was said of him by his friends, so much so that He ate sardines with his fingers, which he dutifully cleaned afterwards by the simple expedient of wiping them with his coat. He was almost always in rags, and the Filipino colony in Spain felt ashamed of him and his eccentricities. Mariano Ponce used to buy suits for him, but Lopez Jaena was so enamored of his old and dirty ones that he implored Ponce not to throw them away. Then he would pawn his new suits and promptly return to his beloved rags. Yet anyone reading any of his speeches or articles would easily feel the impact of his hidden personality, for he had the power and the genius of a born orator. That is why his eccentricities, while shameful, were easily forgiven and forgotten, for when he spoke he shone with the halo of saintliness. This was proved once more when invited to lecture at the Ateneo de Barcelona. He conjured up imaginary facts in such a manner as to convince his hearers of the truth of what he was saying. When his Filipino prince pulled his coat to call his attention to his wanton display of irresponsibility, he ignored him and continued dishing out more imaginary facts. When asked at the lecture his prince chided him for his inventions, he calmly answered, "If what I have said was not true, no one among those present could believe me, either because on that subject they are as ignorant as I am." As editor of the Sole, Lopez Jaena did not receive any salary. His only compensation was free lodging, meals, clothing, and a little pocket money for trivial expenses. To make him right, the Filipinos would refuse to give him food. In the cafe where he spent most of his waking hours, Lopez Jaena would sit idly, order cups of wine, and magnificently allow others to spend for him. Here in the cafe, his friends would give him sheets of paper on which to write his pieces, and surprisingly enough, he wrote with ease when his head was full of spirits. It was in the characteristic manner that he wrote most of his speeches and articles, but such mode of living, such mental vigor without rest and sufficient nutriment could only lead to physical breakdown. Tuberculosis stepped in and challenged his oratory to drive it out of his lungs, but Lopez Jaena was too quick to reply effectively, and on January 20, 1896 in Barcelona, the Great Filipino passed on as a living memory. So, bukas na yung kay Marcelo It's Del Pilar, guys. Bye everyone. God bless.